Welcome back to Matter, or a unit on Matter, which is going to be your third unit, and it's going to be for second grade. This week we're going to be revisiting some of the things that you already learned, and we're going to confirm that they're still fresh in your mind, that you still have the same basic understandings of the concept of matter. So the first thing that I want you to do is you're going to create a Google document titled Review, and this review you're going to be using over the next 5 weeks. The next couple of, or I should say the next 5 weeks, this document is going to be very useful to you also because it's going to kind of relate back to the things that you learned, and you can use them in your experiment and presentation to be done at the end. The first thing I want you to do after creating that document is log into Discovery Education. Remember, that's waukesha.discoveryeducation.com, using your school username and password, and then find this video. It's about 2 minutes long and it's on Matter. After watching the video, list at least 10 different things in your house that are made up of matter. And don't overthink this, because if you know what matter is, it shouldn't be too difficult. Remember, it could be things that you play with or things that you use or your family uses. Keep in mind that in a couple of weeks you might use some of these things in your classifying activity, which again is going to be kind of a review of some of the things that you've already been working on. As an extension, and this is something that isn't required, but if you're sitting with your family or if you're working with your parent, it might be a good thing to do. But remembering the states of matter, next to each of those 10 items, write what that state of matter is. So remember, there are 3 different states of matter, and if you cannot recall, that's fine. But if you do recall, use this as a practice opportunity. For your literacy connection this week, you're going to be continuing to work on that experiment. And up to this point, you should have chosen your experiment, and you should have started writing on your document. If you haven't done that, make sure you go back and do all of the literacy up to this point, because this is where it's going to start to get a lot more difficult and take more time. This week, you're going to complete the experiment 1 time. Next week, you're going to be completing it again, and that's to confirm that your conclusions are correct and your hypothesis and observations are. So, like I said, complete the experiment that you chose using the exact directions that you wrote out last week, or I should say 2 weeks ago. If you have to make changes as you complete the experiment, make sure that you do so, but make sure you also write those down. Another reminder is make sure to take pictures of each step of the process, because you'll be using that in the last couple of weeks in creating your presentation. On your Unit 3 lab report, under Observations, write Experiment 1. As you complete the experiment, write down any observations or data that you might have or see. So for example, something that some of you might have sort of as an observation, I just use these as examples, but I saw the water separate from the oil. There was 1 inch of water on the bottom and 2 inches of oil on the top. Notice how I used measurements. Another example is, even after I mixed the water and oil for 30 seconds, it only took 3 seconds to separate. So again, I'm using numbers. I'm using actual statistical data to show my observations. For your math connection this week, you're going to be creating a chart, and you're going to be listing some items from least to greatest. Or I should say greatest to least, sorry. So it's not too difficult, but I want you to understand what is greater and what is less. So you should understand that already based upon your math knowledge. But otherwise, watch the video on volume and mass to understand what volume and mass are, because you're going to be using volume and mass, and then you're going to be using that greatest to least listing. After you open or you create your Google document titled Math Connections Unit 3 and watch the video on Discovery Education, I want you to find 3 different items in your home that are of different sizes and weights. So none of them should be the same size or the same weight. Taking those 3 items, you're going to compare them, and you're going to do so in this chart. And to create the chart in your document, go to Insert, then Table, and then create one that's 2 by 2, so very simple. At the top of one column, you should have the word mass, and at the top of the other, you should have the word volume. Next, I want you to take those 3 items, and I want you to list them from the greatest mass to the least mass. So remember, you have to understand what mass is. You should be watching this video. That's only 1.5 minutes long. If you need a hint at what mass is, watch the video again. Make sure that you, or feel free, I should say, to pause the video when they're talking about mass so you can discuss it with your family if you have to. Lastly, I want you to take those exact same 3 items once more and list them from greatest volume to least volume. And again with this one, feel free to watch the video more than once and stop the video if you need to so you can discuss it with your family. Then lastly, underneath, I want you to write one sentence write one sentence under your chart about why you think your list looks the way it does. What do mass and volume have in common? So what are you seeing as a commonality on your list? So the writing prompt, and should be pretty easy to fill in the blank for you, is the blank the mass, the blank the volume. So with that, think of the words greater and less than again. So is it the greater the mass, the greater the volume? The less the mass, the less the volume? The greater the mass, the less the volume? Or the less the mass, the greater the volume? So it's one of those 4 different options.